Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. Last year, on my previous Reddit account, I mentioned my interracial marriage in a relationship advice thread. Within minutes, I received a private message from a user who called me a race traitor. "You're betraying your heritage by being with someone outside your race," the message read. "What century are you living in?" I replied, but received no response. Looking at their profile, I noticed the account was active for 8 years. People tend to reuse usernames, so I started searching variations like username at Gmail, username at Yahoo. Eventually, I found a match on Outlook. Someone selling Super Bowl tickets had posted their email address. This alone wasn't conclusive evidence, but in the ticket listing, they mentioned living in Seattle and being a devoted Seahawks fan. Checking the Reddit user's history, they frequently posted in RR Seattle and discussed attending Seahawks games. Another post mentioned growing up in Vancouver. Through the ticket listing email, I discovered their real name. Their company website had an executive bio since they were a VP of operations. The bio mentioned their Vancouver background, passion for the Seahawks, and love for Seattle. Their LinkedIn profile popped up in my search too. I sent them a connection request which they accepted, not surprising given their 500 plus connections. The evidence was adding up. Same unique username across platforms, Seattle resident active in local subreddit Seahawks fan Vancouver background. Their Facebook profile was public, containing subtle racist undertones. Their Reddit history was far more explicitly racist. Given the multiple connecting factors, I compiled a detailed report with screenshots and links. Considering their senior position likely involved hiring decisions and their company's prominent diversity statements, I contacted their HR department. "Would you be concerned if one of your executives was openly racist online and undermining your diversity initiatives?" I asked. "Very concerned," the HR director replied. "Do you have any evidence?" I explained my investigation and emailed over my findings. When I followed up weeks later, they gave a standard response. "We appreciate the information but can't discuss personnel matters." I monitored their LinkedIn profile monthly. Soon enough, they posted, "Excited to explore new opportunities. Open to positions in operations leadership." I messaged them on Reddit. "Noticed you're job hunting. Thought you should know why." "I'll find you," they responded. "I'll make your family suffer. You're dead." They still hadn't realized I could track their LinkedIn activity. I added their threats to my report folder. Weekly LinkedIn checks showed they landed a new position. The new company's HR was equally receptive to discussing their recent hire's online behavior. The HR manager, whose voice and name suggested she was African American, was particularly interested in the evidence. Shortly after, their entire online presence vanished. LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, everything. The new company's executive team listing never included their name. I would have continued tracking them, but they finally learned to stay offline. The next one is an entitled people story. I had just turned 18 and was living with my parents in a decent suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just regular middle-class homes with small yards. My parents gifted me a used Toyota Corolla for graduation. Nothing flashy, just a reliable 2012 model in decent shape. I was beyond grateful since I needed it to commute to my community college classes and my part-time job at the local hardware store. Our neighborhood didn't have an HOA, thank God, but we did have this one neighbor. Let's just call her Karen. She lived 3 houses down and seemed to appoint herself as the unofficial neighborhood watchdog. She was probably in her 50s, always wearing those designer sunglasses perched on her head, and carrying around a small, yappy dog that seemed as miserable as anyone who had to talk to her. I tried to avoid her as much as possible after watching her scream at the mailman for damaging her grass by stepping on it while delivering mail. She once called the police because someone's trash can was left out past 6 p.m. on collection day. Not exactly a stable person. One Friday afternoon, I came home from work exhausted after a long shift. The street parking in front of our house was taken, so I parked my car legally on the street about 2 houses down. I didn't think much of it. It was a public street and there were no restrictions. The next morning, I woke up to go to my Saturday class and found my car was gone. At first, I thought it was stolen, so I ran inside to tell my parents. My dad immediately called the police while I frantically searched the area. As I was walking around looking for any sign of my car, guess who approaches me with the smuggest look on her face? "Looking for something?" Karen asked, practically gloating. "My car is missing," I replied, trying to be polite despite her tone. "Oh, that old Toyota? I had it towed. Children shouldn't be driving cars in this neighborhood," she said with this weird satisfaction in her voice. I was completely stunned. "What? I'm 18. I have a valid license. You can't just tow someone's car. Well, I did. You look 14 at best, and I'm tired of teenagers racing down our streets. I'm keeping this neighborhood safe. She crossed her arms like she'd just saved everyone from a terrorist attack. You had no right to do that. That's my property. I was starting to lose my cool. I have every right. I've lived here for 15 years. I know what's best for this street. She then turned and walked away, her little dog glaring at me over her shoulder. I immediately ran back to tell my parents what happened. My dad was furious. The police had already arrived to take the stolen vehicle report, and when we explained what actually happened, they were confused. A private citizen can't authorize a tow from a public street unless they own the property or the vehicle is blocking their driveway, the officer explained. Do you know which towing company she used? We didn't, but the officer made some calls and found my car at Quick Tow, a company about 20 minutes away. Apparently, Karen had called them claiming my car was blocking her driveway, a complete lie since I was parked 2 houses away from her. The officer was great and offered to follow us to the tow yard to sort things out. When we arrived, the tow company initially wanted to charge me $275 for the tow and overnight storage. I showed them my license proving I was 18, not some child joyriding, and explained the situation. The tow yard manager checked their records and realized something wasn't right. The woman who called this in said she was the property owner where the vehicle was parked and that it was blocking access to her home. We have a record of the call and her signature on the authorization form. The police officer asked to see the paperwork, and sure enough, Karen had signed a form claiming she owned the property where my car was parked and that it was blocking her driveway. 2 complete lies. This is fraud, the officer stated. The vehicle was parked legally on a public street, not blocking any driveways, and this woman has no authority to have it towed. The tow company manager, now realizing they'd been duped into an illegal tow, waived all the fees and released my car immediately. He wasn't happy about being manipulated into potentially illegal activity, but this isn't where the story ends. The officer explained that what Karen did was actually criminal. She filed a false report and committed fraud by signing documents with false information. He asked if I wanted to press charges. Part of me wanted to just let it go and avoid more drama, but my dad reminded me that if we didn't stand up to her, she'd just keep doing this to others, so I said yes, I wanted to press charges. The officer took detailed statements from me, my parents, and the tow company. He even drove back to our neighborhood to take photos of where my car had been parked, confirming it wasn't blocking any driveways and was completely legal. 2 days later, Karen got a visit from the police. She was issued a summons to appear in court on charges of filing a false report and fraud. From what our other neighbors told us, she went ballistic when the officers showed up, screaming about delinquent teenagers and how she was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. The court date came about a month later. I was nervous since I'd never been to court before, but my parents came with me for support. We had a brief meeting with the district attorney beforehand, who explained that cases like this rarely go to trial because the evidence was so clear-cut. Sure enough, when we got into the courtroom, Karen's attorney immediately approached the DA to discuss a plea deal. Karen ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge of filing a false report. The judge wasn't lenient, though. She ordered Karen to pay a $1,000 fine, perform 40 hours of community service, and pay restitution to both me for my missed day of work and the inconvenience, and the towing company for their wasted time and resources. The judge also issued a stern warning to Karen. The streets are public property. You have no authority to regulate who parks there or to determine who is old enough to drive. That's what the DMV is for. If you ever pull something like this again, you'll face much more severe consequences. Karen looked absolutely humiliated. Her face was red, and she couldn't even look at me as she left the courtroom. The best part came about a week after the court date. I was washing my car in our driveway when an official-looking envelope arrived for me. Inside was a cashier's check for $350 from Karen, along with a court-ordered written apology. The apology was clearly written by her lawyer. It was stiff and formal, but it was still satisfying to see. Word about what happened spread quickly through the neighborhood. Other neighbors started coming forward with their own Karen stories. How she called code enforcement on them for minor issues, reported kids for playing too loudly, and generally made everyone's lives miserable. But after seeing her face consequences for her actions, people stopped being intimidated by her. Karen has been noticeably quieter since then. She still lives in the neighborhood, but she keeps to herself now. I see her occasionally walking her dog, but she crosses the street to avoid me. Fine by me. Looking back, I'm glad I stood up to her. It would have been easier to just pay the tow fee and move on, but some people need to learn they can't bully others without consequences. I also learned an important lesson about standing up for myself and not letting others push me around just because I'm young. The police officer who helped us still waves when he drives through our neighborhood on patrol. He told my dad that stories like mine are why he became a cop, to help people who are being treated unfairly. As for my car, I now make sure to park it in our driveway whenever possible. Not because I'm worried about Karen anymore, but because after all that drama, I've become a bit protective of my little Toyota. It's been through enough. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Several years ago, a friend, Mark, started a home-based computer software business. He and his wife lived in their home for about 10 years and had a well-established home phone number. This was around the time that cell phones were just beginning to be popular, so 95% of people still used mainly landlines. Mark worked 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., the same shift as his wife, so his customers could be free to discuss their computer needs uninterrupted after their own businesses closed for the day. Most computer maintenance still had to be done in person instead of remotely, so customers could drop off devices after work and pick them up from Mark's back porch on their way to work the next day. All went swimmingly for a few months until a new doctor opened up a practice in town, complete with a telephone number differing from Mark's by 1 digit. Mark's number had a 3, where the medical office had an 8 in the last 4-number combination. Misdialing was frequent. At first, there were occasional calls to which Mark would patiently redirect the caller. As time wore on and the practice got more and more referrals from local hospitals to give Dr. New in town an established client base, the calls began to come at all hours, 24 hours a day, weekends, nights, holidays, you name it. The office still got calls after hours to an answering service for patients to find out who was on call, and for the hospital staff to reach doctors after hours. Mark had to unplug the phone just to have a conversation over lunch with his wife, and in order to sleep. Also, not ideal when you have 3 daughters of dating age out after dark. Mark called the doctor's office and asked them to please change their phone number so he and his family could get some peace and quiet, and so he could build his own business to support them. Since he had his phone longer, he felt the doctor should be gracious and change his number to a different one to stop the confusion. He was told in about so many words by the doctor that it was too bad, but nothing was going to be done, as advertising, stationery, business cards, and signage were expensive to redo, not to mention convey the new information to all his patients, medical registries, the medical board and societies, and hospitals. Just do the best you can. I'm sure the calls will stop soon. Good luck to you. Okie dokie. I'll do my best to take care of things, Mark cheerfully replied. After that, Mark began to field all the calls that came in personally. You've had the sniffles all morning after working in the yard around pollen? You'd better come right in. You start coughing every time you smoke a cigarette? Come on in. I'm not the doctor, but a temperature of 98.9 sounds a little high to me. We'll see you right after lunch today. You're new in town and have kids who need physicals and shots for school next week? It just so happens we have an opening in an hour. No, don't worry, we can take all 5 of them at once today. Whatever the problem was, he started making appointments for each and every person calling. All were delighted to have such personal attention and prompt appointments. Sure, we take all insurance plans, come right in. He also made routine checkup type appointments for 4:30 p.m. one Friday afternoon for 6 different people. Bright and early the next Monday morning, Dr. Newentown called and begged him to stop. Mark said, "I will if you will." The doctor had a new phone number before the end of the week. The next one is an entitled people story. My cousin sucks. That's the long and short of it. She is spoiled, stupid, and absolutely convinced the world is out to get her. Let's call her Emma. Emma has had issues for ages, but's due to her manipulative behavior only now is the rest of the family realizing how crappy she is. We got along fine at first. We didn't see each other often, so that probably helped. We were both closer to another cousin, Brandy, who we both saw more often, although she was a lot closer to her since they grew up together. That's where the problems started. I have an older sister, Vivian, who was very close to Brandy. Emma didn't like that and told the adults that she was trying to isolate Brandy from the rest of the family. This worked because most of them are religious fruitcakes. We were pissed and stopped talking to her for a while, but she came up with a half-assed apology and we let it slide. Despite that nonsense, we grew closer and she started telling us insane stories of the crap she used to get up to at school. Slept with teachers to get good grades, kind of insane. She was in high school. She graduated at 16. We were like, "Are you okay?" Because that was really crazy, right? We thought she was being blackmailed or something, because that is an unfortunately common thing. But she was like, "Oh, it's cool. I even threatened to tell their wives if they didn't increase my grades like I wanted." Okay. I mean, if the teachers knowingly had an affair with a child, they deserve the worst the world can throw at them, but the fact that she continued to associate with these people just didn't sit right. But at that point, she had graduated already, so we couldn't do anything for her, so all we could do was notify the school, which she somehow took as a personal attack. We hadn't even mentioned her name in the anonymous email we sent, but she saw it as us looking down at her because we got good grades without even trying, and had the luxury of being holier than her due to natural smarts she wasn't blessed with. She went on and on and on. At some point I thought I would roll my eyes straight out of my head, which naturally made her madder. That passed relatively quietly. Then she told us that the boyfriend she had stolen from one of her friends fingered her in class while they were having a lesson. I stupidly asked why she thought that was a good idea. Nobody else said anything because they were all clearly smarter than me. She told me off because I didn't understand what it was like being in love, because I've never had a boyfriend and how you sometimes couldn't control yourself. Gross, but okay, I guess. What did I know, right? Anyway, all of this is relatively tame. She was annoying, but our drama was mostly sleeping contained and was never big things. We were clearly stupid. I mentioned Brandy before. Brandy had a butt-ugly a-hole of a boyfriend called Mitch. He was awful to her. He had an iPhone but refused to call her, constantly asked for her attention but ignored her when she didn't answer his texts fast enough. Either way, we were glad when it ended, and then she told us under the heaviest promise to secrecy I have ever been under that Emma had slept with him, and that it had been going on for weeks at that point. According to Brandy, Emma said that he came on to her and had been pressuring her to sleep with him, but Brandy wasn't so sure because it wasn't the first time it had happened, but at this point we weren't even surprised, but we were shocked that she would do it to Brandy of all people, and even worse that Emma had done it from Brandy's very first boyfriend. And because Brandy's taste in men was absolutely atrocious, most of them took Emma up on the offer. Of course, none of this was Emma's fault. After a while, Brandy moved in with us, and Emma followed. We went bar hopping to celebrate. After a while, I wanted to go home and said I'd be fine on my win, but Emma berated me for being a killjoy and then started a fight with some random girls and almost gore us murdered. Despite all that, that wasn't the real issue. One day, Vivian and Emma argued, and Emma somehow turned the house against her. Even Brandy, who should have known better. Brandy did eventually apologize, but I was done at this point. Vivian did forgive her, but they had been close after all. I guess she didn't want to lose a friend. She was a little distant with her now, though. Either way, they felt the distance, and among other things, my dad bought us, his children, mind you, new phones to replace our old ones, and they felt left out for some reason, even though their phones were brand new, and decided to take a step back from the family. If only. Meanwhile, all this is happening while she's having issues with another cousin, Megan. She accused Megan of leading Brandy astray because they did stuff without her. She starts a bunch of awful rumors, tells a lot of lies like Megan was stealing from work and had a lit of boyfriends, which made a lot of the family stop talking to Megan. Emma applied for college not long after, and my mum, her aunt, agreed to help pay for a couple of semesters as her parents couldn't quite afford it as it was a private college. She was supposed to graduate 3 years ago. That amounts to more than a few semesters, and it didn't help that she kept stealing the money at first until my mum threatened to stop paying. She showed her appreciation by refusing to sit for her exams one year. She wasn't ready, and failing the rest of the time. She finally graduated this year, choosing to get a certificate because the bachelor's was too hard. Somewhere during this, Brandy suddenly falls ill and passes away. During the funeral, she acted like she was the one who suffered the greatest loss, even though Brandy was her mother's only child, and she had already lost her husband. She kept going on how no one could understand what Utes like to lose a sister. Anyway, this is when the family started to look at her more closely. My mom was done with her, but her parents begged her to give her a job. She runs a small daycare, and Emma is good with kids, so why not? And anyway, her certificate was useless because she used AI for every single assignment and literally knows jack crap about her own course, so she was in dire need of a job. Turns out she's crap with everything else. She refuses to help clean unless my mom is there, is rude to the parents that don't bother to fawn after her, is rude to the other employees, and is mean to the kids she doesn't like. On top of that, she's joined up with another problem employee, started an affair with the married bus driver, and is telling them tall tales about our family. Because the people she picked as friends are as snaky as she is, the stories make their way back to us. She said the aunts were abusive and they withheld her rightful inheritance from Brandy from her. What the duck? Brandy didn't even have anything to inherit, and she already took majority of the clothes too. Then one of my mom's friends contacted her. Depsite repeated attempts to rebuff her. She had sent him nudes, and she wasn't smart enough to use the View Once feature either. Then other men from church came out with their stories of being borderline harassed by her when they didn't give her attention, saying this like she's the perfect wife material. She's pretty, she's good in bed, she cooks, etc. These are married men, mind you, because she ran out of single ones. And knowing the kind of men that hang out at African churches, you just know some if them took her UO on it. The problem is, though, no one wants to marry her because she's an absolute harpy. When things don't go her way, you can just imagine how she gets. She gets abusive, throws around some really awful accusations, tears. She's never had a relationship that's lasted more than 2 months. Of course, none of this is her fault. They should be real mean and just give her what she wants. Her dream, naturally, is to be an Instagram trad wife and constantly preach to us on how our habits would never get us husbands. Either way, my parents called her parents and told them they are done. They are sending her home as soon as possible and don't want to see hide or hair of her until the day they die. I'm refraining from commenting, but only because there isn't a respectful way of saying I told you so. The rest of the family is dishing out long-expired apologies and attempting to get my parents to give her another chance. My parents told them they are free to hand out chances if they want, but they handed out enough, thanks. She found out, and of course none of this is her fault. She blocked us all, is claiming blood doesn't mean family and how she is better off without us, courtesy of her snaky friends. She didn't block my dad, though, and is asking for money from him because she thinks my parents don't talk to each other for some reason. She also seems to believe she'll still have a job when the holidays are over for some reason. She decides when the family ties are useful, I suppose. I know this is long, but I needed to rant. I hope you find it as frustrating as I do because I refuse to suffer alone. Anyway, thank you for watching.